Thank you for staying with us, everyone. Let's begin talking about Edo States now, where we understand transition is in the works. Today, of course, there will be some exchange done between the outgoing government and the incoming government. Then tomorrow will be the formality of it, the official inauguration, as we know it. But handover itself in practice will be done today, all else equal. Tomorrow to be the big day, as it were, and then, of course, there will be a new government in place in the state. However, there have been controversies surrounding this process, which is not always the case. Of course, it's the PDP government of Governor OBASEKI handing over to the incoming APC government of Senator Monday Okpebolo, who in 24 hours will officially become the governor of the state. We've seen a back and forth between the Governor Obaseki's team and the incoming Governor Okpebolo's team. It has been trading of blames back and forth, but the question is, how much does that serve the interests of Edo people, and to what extent does it serve that interest, and then in what particular ways? Because when it's all said and done, the ultimate and important thing is to provide leadership for the state in such a way that at least within 4 years, Edo people can put a finger on what specifically this government has, the government of incoming Governor Okpebolo has achieved for them. We're joined by a member of the All Progressives Congress, live via Zoom from Houston, Texas, to help us understand what the development has been these last few weeks, particularly the past few days this morning. Ahmed Mamudu, I want to say a big thank you to you for taking our time. This should be just before 5 a.m. on your end. We appreciate the fact that it's still very early and you're taking our time to join us this morning.
Thank you. I'm happy to join you. Good morning, and good morning to the viewers.
Great. So last time you and I talked here was just as a follow-up to the outcome of the election, which, of course, your man, Senator Monday Okpebolo, won. But now we're not talking about who won and who lost. It is now about transition. How do we have smooth transition from one government to another, regardless of differences in party affiliation, partisan leaning, and what have you? So talk to us about what it is regarding this back and forth we're seeing between the teams of Monday Okpebolo and Godwin Obaseki.
So essentially, to give some background, the back and forth that you've seen between the transition team and the outgoing administration has been a disagreement on some of the facts that were presented, and the dispute on what those facts represent without any evidence. So they were basically having disagreements over some of the information they were being given and the veracity of that information. So they basically refused to acknowledge the information without proof. For example, they were talking about some of the projects that the outgoing administration said they had completed, and they wanted to find out where the funding for those projects came from and how they were spent. Also, there were disputes over the ownership of certain projects that were not included in those transition in the transition information. The transition committee was trying to find out the ownership structure of those projects that were allegedly owned by Edo State government and how those funds were purposed for those projects. That's essentially what you saw happening there. So it came to a point where the transition committee basically decided that they were not going to partake in a charade, and then decided they were just going to find out whatever needs to be found out when they assume office, when the administration takes off proper.
Some people say it is impossible to divorce this, well, let me use your word, charade, from the bad blood that had been built up going into the election or through the campaign process and what have you. Would you say that's a factor here?
So that's a yes and a no, because in all honesty, the mandate of the transition committee was to try and ascertain as much as possible, without being in government, of course, the financial position of the state, the expenses, the whatever was outstanding, the property that the state had acquired and what had been spent over the course of the outgoing administration. And when they found out that this information was not forthcoming, they decided the best thing was not to partake in it. Now, you say there may have been some bad blood. That is clearly what may have transpired, but to the extent that they were asking for information that should have been the property of the citizens of Edo State, I don't think we can say that that's a fact. If this information is readily available, it should have been presented, because these are the people that have been mandated by the people of Edo State to take over from the outgoing administration. So some of these things should have just been official functions, and it should have been routine without any unnecessary tension being drawn into it.
The outgoing governor, Godwin Obaseki, who by tomorrow would have been in office for exactly 8 years, now says that your party, the APC, did not invite him to the inauguration for tomorrow. Other people say, well, inauguration is supposed to be midwifed by the outgoing governments, right? What is the protocol? What should it be by standard?
So the old phrase, soldier go, soldier come, barrack remain, comes to mind here. The government of Edo State is a continuous and undying project. Godwin Obaseki is simply the political head of that undying project that, God forbid, will always continue to run regardless of who is there. So where they found that the outgoing administration was withholding information, was withholding some of the responsibilities it should have taken, I don't think at that point in time you would find yourself willing to accommodate anything from the outgoing administration anymore. So regardless of Godwin Obaseki's presence, the transition is going to come to an end. His tenure will terminate tomorrow, and God willing, the new governor, Senator Okwebolo, is going to be sworn in with or without Godwin Obaseki. Some of these things they are simply matters of fact. Now, if there's any personal animosity, I hope that doesn't translate one way or the other. And the governor is not generally somebody that one would rely on for his words to be taken on their face value. So as things develop, I'm sure some of this information will come to light.
Is it not valid an argument, Ahmed, for us to say that your party, the All Progressives Congress in Edo State, is making this a personal affair, making it an Obaseki issue, instead of making it a people-centric conversation? For example, the national leader, the national chairman of the All Progressives Congress, Dr. Abdullahi Ganduje, had even told Senator Monday Okpebolo very pointedly to say, look, enough of the quote-unquote fight with Obaseki. Stay focused on providing leadership for Edo State people. How would you explain this?
So what the party chairman said was not a personal attack on Senator Monday Okpebolo. What he was simply drawing attention to is the fact that the campaign period is over, and now is the time for the incoming administration to buckle up and be prepared to perform the responsibilities that the mandate require from it. Now, I know a lot of this seems possibly like an unnecessary back and forth, but there comes to a point in time where somebody needs to draw the line and say, look, this is unnecessary. The outgoing administration has tried everything possible to make it difficult for the transition committee to operate within the framework and an understandable convivial atmosphere between the two parties. So a fight is not brought by one person. To assume that it's only the incoming administration that is providing this hostile environment is entirely inaccurate. The outgoing administration has a larger part to play because they need to be more, they needed at the point in time to be more welcoming, more forthcoming, more ready to share, and more aware of the fact that power is transient. And this is what we are witnessing. We are witnessing the unwillingness to hand over power. And there's nothing that can be done. Whatever happens, This power must be handed over. That's what you are witnessing.
Okay, I don't want us to go into the details of the distinction between unwillingness to hand over power and the allegation that the outgoing government is withholding essential information that the incoming government needs. But let's move away from that and look at one narrative that the APC has sold for a long time, for a few years, that the Obaseki government has not done anything in those states. Of course, the 8 years of Obaseki cycles out in a few hours. But is it correct to say the government has not done anything in 8 years? And on what basis does the APC say that?
So there are two parts to the two-part answer to what you are saying. The idea that government is a continuum and whoever is the political head or call him the governor, is supposed to take the best things of whatever he inherited, build on them, and then leave them plus his own legacy when he's outgoing. So the question I asked on this to answer this very question previously is somebody should indicate a legacy project of the outgoing administration that was conceptualized, developed, handed over, and it is still available for the public to come and put their hands on and say, this is an Obaseki legacy project. And the people that were in that program, just like now, were unable to point out anything definitive. All they kept on talking about were projects that had been remodeled, refurbished, resurfaced, etc., etc. There was always an existing project which they modified. So for want of a better word, the simple answer to your question is this. This is the second part. What has the administration done that the people of Edo can point to as something that is a legacy project that they can remember? And I will leave that question hanging. But let me say this. It is impossible to say in 8 years an administration has not impacted the lives of the people. But let us take the most important aspects one by one. Health services, what is outstanding about the services they've provided? In education, we're talking about tablets and Wi-Fi projects that do not exist and people cannot point their fingers to. What about other services, infrastructure? What has been done that can actually be pointed out and said, this is what is outstanding about this administration? You come back empty with all of these things, and these are not things that we need to agree with. We need to go out to Edo State and look at it. The continuous reference to Benin as development or things that happen in Benin as development at the expense of the larger population of Edo State is always a mistake. And then you come out, they tell you something like the civil servants have been paid on time. What is the percentage of civil service compared to the population of the Edo State people? So there's a lot that needs to be highlighted. And these are the gaps that the transition committee said, we cannot find you giving us information for these things. And that's where some of this conflict comes from.
Just this week, Senator Monday Kwebolo has been telling Edo people, indeed Nigerians, that look, Obaseki has left, or to use his word, fled on a disguised bus to an unknown location. In fact, he says he has traveled through land borders in a bid to evade some alleged EFCC arrests and what have you. Is it not too much of, is that not an overreach? More like, in some sense, being petty for a man who's going to be a governor in a few hours to be found in the circus engaging in such a conversation?
So to be honest, I've seen the memes that you referred to, but I have not seen them attributed to the incoming administration or Senator Okpebolo. I cannot speak to that, to be honest, because I haven't seen it. And if you say it is, I'm not able to comment on that until I actually see it by myself.
Let's talk about issues around what happens when one government leaves office and another one takes over, right? Some people are saying, well, because of OBASEKI allegedly didn't work in Edo State, and others also are now alleging that he had stolen monies, he can't account for funds, he can't account for billions, some say tens of billions, loans, IGR, FAC funds and what have you, that it has to be proved by the incoming administration. Is that the way to go, given the circumstances under which we now find ourselves?
So, circumstances regardless, the idea behind understanding what a probe is to understand that if you don't know what is in the past, you are not able to move forward positively into the future. Whatever the people of Edo State feel is missing or needs to be accounted for, it's a logical point to ask that the outgoing administration should either give account for or be asked to, if they are unwilling to, be probed and these things to be found out. Let's give you a simple example. On the advent of the incoming administration, there were several billions of naira that had been withheld by the federal government before President Buhari came into office, that the comrade governor Oshomole had used to repair the roads that were federal roads in and around the vicinity of Benin and Edo State. These monies ran into, if I'm not mistaken, about 25 billion or something in that range. Those funds were released to the outgoing administration. And then towards the twilight of the outgoing administration, all they were doing was putting up signboards that this road is a federal road and do not blame the government of Edo State. What happened to that money that was released to them? If only that, it could have been used to do some more work and the federal government would have refunded that money. What happened to that? So some of these things, there's a background to it. There's a deeper message to it. We are talking about the income of the Edo State government. Quite all right, it has grown. It has grown exponentially. A lot of the growth, the argument is being made that a lot of the growth is, for example, the removal of the fuel subsidy and then the increase in allocation that is being shared among the Niger Delta states, etc., etc. Essentially, everybody knows that Edo State is a civil service state, and then it's not really, you don't have as much internally generated revenue as some other more, let me call it, more business inclined states. So that is to be expected that the IGR is not as great. But regardless, the question is that is being asked is, what has been spent? Where have these monies been put? And who has been responsible for these expenses? I'll have you remember, that for the better part of the first term of Governor OBASEKI, he had 14 members of the State House of Assembly absent from their posts because he refused to swear them in. Now, you know that the State House of Assembly is supposed to have oversight over the budget and the expenses of the state. That was not done for almost 4 years. So these questions are very pertinent questions. The Edo people their monies must be accounted for. We cannot look at it as a personal animosity to request for an accounting. The outgoing administration owes it as part of the social contract to account for every penny that came in, to tell us where it was spent, and to indicate that that was the best utilization of those funds under the circumstances.
You used the term underlying issues a while ago, and we understand we have a bunch of such issues dating back to even when the comrade governor, Adams Oshomole, was still in office, into when OBASEKI just took the reins in November of 2016. That was some 8 years ago. And this was one of those issues, which is now back to the conversation, is the ownership status of Edo University, IAMO. Of course, for the sake of our viewers, benefit of our viewers this morning, there's Edo State-owned Ambrose Ali University in Ekpoma. But there are people who now say, within and outside of Edo State, that the ownership status of Edo University, IAMO, which some persons have even said in the news that at the point the National Universities Commission has said, we won't go further with accreditation of courses in this school until the state government tells us exactly what the ownership status of this school is. Some people say it belongs to former Governor Adams Oshomole. Others say, well, it's supposed to be for Edo State. Others say, well, when OBASEKI came into office, he took over ownership. Isn't that one of the several issues breeding some bad blood between the former governor and his, well, let's say, estranged political beneficiary?
So if you will remember that one of the flashpoints of the outgoing administration with the relationship, regarding the relationship to Comrade Governor Oshomole, was at the point in time where there was a matriculation or a graduation ceremony at the Yamo University. And the outgoing deputy governor, Philip Shaibu, led a group of people that refused to allow Comrade Oshomole access to that event. Now, if you look back into the history and the acrimony that developed in that relationship between Oshomole and Godwin Obaseki, you realize that if there was any doubt as to the ownership of that university, Godwin Obaseki would have used that to crucify Comrade Oshomole. So let us put this issue to rest once and for all. There is no doubt as the ownership of that university belongs to the Edo State people, the Edo State government as their representatives, and there is no issue regarding the ownership whatsoever. That project is 100% owned by the people of Edo State, and they will reap the benefits of it because it's a futuristic project. I don't think there's any issue on that. There are several other issues that may be they may be contentious, but that should not be one of them.
Let's begin to wind down now, Ahmed. Okwebolo becomes a governor in a few hours, but they say you can't teach a dog a new trick. What that means in this context is Okwebolo had enjoyed the support of the establishment of Edo politics in the manner of speaking, talking about people like Comrade Adams, former Governor Adams Oshomole, Pastor Osagi Ezeyamu, and a few others within that state. And we know that at the point, politically speaking, the former governor and Pastor Osagi Ezeyamu were not seen eye to eye, even when it came to the issue of determining who the flag bearer of your party would be going into this last election that produced Monday Okwebolo. It was still an issue of strife between Oshomole and Ezeyamu. How will these factors define the governance and the system, political system in those states under the leadership of Senator Monday Okwebolo?
So you're right. There were definitely, pre the primaries, there were definitely varying interests that were contending for the political leadership of Edo State. And Comrade Oshomole was interested in a different candidate, and Pastor Osagi Ezeyamu was interested in a different candidate. That is true, and this is public knowledge. However, at the conclusion of the primaries and the emergence of Senator Monday Okwebolo as the party flag bearer, all of these contending forces came back, and then they reunited behind him, and that's the victory that you saw play out. And then he won the popular mandate of the Edo State people. So all those issues have been put to rest. All our great leaders in the party are now 100% behind the incoming administration. They've lent all their support. They've lent their resources, both financial, time, and otherwise. And that is what you saw parlay into the victory that the APC is enjoying today. So there may have been some issues before the primaries, but as soon as the flag bearer was chosen, everybody went behind him, and that's what you are seeing today. So we expect all of these things to continue as the new administration comes in. Of course, there's going to be what you always refer to as the honeymoon period, where the administration will be allowed to settle in, choices will be made, appointments will be made, etc., etc. It's natural to assume that all the party leaders will be carried along in the process of forming this new administration and helping it to settle down, find its feet, and go back to the historical antecedents of the APC, which is to bring as much development as close to the people as possible. So this is what we expect, and I'm sure the incoming administration is not going to disappoint in that regard.
All right, Grace. Let's zip things up with this last question. We're saying how one administration after another, whether it's at the state or federal level, would foot drag, kickstarting governments because certain key appointments have not been done, and it's almost taken forever in some cases to make these appointments happen. From between 2020, just after he was inaugurated for his second term in office, into late 2021, it took outgoing Governor OBASEKI about 11 months to put a cabinet in place. Many factors were adduced to have been the reason for that. However, that action alone, that development, allowed him beat former President Muhammadu Buhari, who also took 6 months to put a cabinet in place after coming into office on the 29th of May in 2015. Now, let's use this as a basis to address the issue of what exactly should someone like Senator Monday Okpebholo be learning from these past instances of these gentlemen in terms of putting the right team on the ground and then getting things really fired up.
My expectation would be that the incoming administration is ready to hit the ground running, as they say. Everything lies, of course, on the incoming governor, Senator Monday Okpebholo, but I expect that within 2 to 3 months at the latest, his administration should be fully formed, because the people of Edo State are impatient. They are waiting for governance. There has been a lack and a gap. There has been too much space between the elitism approach of the outgoing administration and the people-oriented, hands-on approach that the APC promises to deliver from the one. So my advice to the incoming administration would be hit the ground running, present all the candidates for the positions, particularly the positions that are essential to the running of the state administration, and start delivering services as soon as possible. That would be my advice. There is no time to waste. There is no time to be tardy, and this should be done post haste.
Ahmed Mamudu, would like to say a big thank you to you, particularly for allowing us crack up your sleep a bit this morning, given the time zone differences. We appreciate your time on the program.
Thank you, Uri.